Right. Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Somebody give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, great. So thank you for joining us today for another episode of In the Valley, Strengthening the Team. The goal of these sessions is to showcase our employees, highlight the diversity of our team, and foster inclusiveness throughout the division. I appreciate everyone joining us today for the seventh episode of this People Focus series. I'm Major General Diana Holland, Commander of the Mississippi Valley Division, and I'll be moderating today's discussion on the topic of Hispanic Heritage Month. Each year, we observe National Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15th to October 15th and celebrate the histories, culture, and contributions of our people who themselves came from, or their parents or grandparents or others came from, Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, or Central or South America. On the panel with me today are Mr. Pete Perez. He is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Chief of Engineering and Construction. Guillermo Mendoza, he is from the Institute for Water Resources. Lupe Santos Jensen from the St. Paul District, Jose Lopez from the St. Louis District, and Kimberly Cruz Fernandez from the Vicksburg District. So before we get started, a couple of administrative notes for our audience. If you have questions for our panelists, please put them in the chat. We are monitoring the chat, and if we have time, we're going to pull a couple of those questions and assign them to one or two of our guest panelists. Second, please keep your system on mute and turn off your video. We will manually mute you if we have to, but would rather that everyone in the audience be responsible for their own mics, as it's very disruptive to have any interruption. The only people who should be unmuted and on video will be me, our 5 panelists, and our sign language interpreter. I appreciate everyone's help with that. So before we begin with the questions that I have, panelists, I'd like to ask each of you to take 2 to 3 minutes to introduce yourselves. Tell us about your heritage, when you joined the Corps, what motivated you to go into your chosen career fields, or anything else you'd like to share. And we're going to start with Mr. Perez, to be followed by Guillermo, to be followed by Lupe, then Jose, then Kimberly. So Pete, if you could get us started with your introduction.
All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. Well, I'll tell you just a little bit about myself here. Had started off very humble beginnings. I refer to the neighborhood I grew up in as a culturally enriched environment, and that's probably about the best way to frame it. I had great parents who instilled values, morals, ethics in the family. Dad was in the Army, served 29 and a half years. Retired as a command sergeant major. And so part of what he instilled in me and my other siblings was whatever you do to the best of your ability and use your God-given talent to the utmost. So whatever it is, you got to earn it. And so, you know, as far as culture, you know, again, it's the family. And that was always very important to us. And I was blessed to have cousins on either side of where we lived. And so it was closely knit unit, and that paid huge dividends, I guess, growing up, because you always had family around. As far as, you know, joining the Corps, it was an afterthought for me. I started off in private industry and worked there for 6 months. 6 years. And then my father got sick. And so I returned to San Antonio from Dallas, and I saw an ad in the paper for the Corps. I had done design work, and here was an opportunity to learn how to do the other side, which was construction. And next thing you know, 30 years later, here I am as the chief of E&C for the Corps of Engineers. And I have provided General Holland what I refer to as my journey through the wilderness, and where you sought growth opportunities that the Corps does offer. And so had that expeditionary mindset, and have visited a lot of different places, worked with a lot of great people, And along the way, you have an opportunity to, again, evaluate what you want to do. There are checkpoints and how you gauge success and what does success mean to you. And again, it's a great way to lay out one's career journey. And so I've been blessed throughout my 30 years of working with the Corps. So no better organization to work for.
Buenos dias. I'm Peruvian American, and I joined the Corps in 2009 from the private sector. I was doing contracting work for the World Bank and USAID in largely Latin America. And I've always liked engineering and the outdoors. So, working water resources seemed to combine these two things. And when a job came up with the Corps, I joined the Corps thinking that it'd be 5 years stint, but I've loved it ever since. Since I'm almost doing over a decade now, so it's been fantastic. Over.
Good morning. My name is Lucas Santos Jensen, and I am the EEO manager here at the St. Paul District. I started my career here back in the early 80s as a student, and here I am, the EEO manager 40 plus years later. When I was growing up, my dad always told us that you picked a career and you stuck with it. And that is what I chose to do, was chose the Corps of Engineers. They were good to me. And they're also very family oriented. Being a Mexican, we're a very close-knit family. Everybody always jokes with us because as we were growing up, our family, we all lived within a mile radius. You'd go down the street, there was your aunt. You go down this way, there was your cousin. And it's not until the next generation where they're all moving out into the suburbs. But family comes first. I mean, that is number one. No matter what you do, you always think of your family first. And that's one thing that I appreciate working for the Corps of Engineers, because even back in the early 80s, I've always been able to have the flexibility to help my kids, my parents, and now I have an elder parent that I help with. And the Corps has been able to give me that flexibility to work with them. In our culture, being a Mexican, your family comes first no matter what. It's mom comes first. So I appreciate working here, and I appreciate you asking me to be on this panel. Over.
Good morning. So as Major General Holland said, my name is Jose Lopez, and I guess I'll start from the beginning. So I was born in 1985 in a town called Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, which is a municipality off the west coast of Puerto Rico with a population of about 70,000. And so I moved to St. Louis in August of 2009 after meeting Dave Bussey, the chief of ENC for St. Louis, and Ashley Clifford from the CPAC here in St. Louis at a recruiting event at the University of Puerto Rico, where I was about to graduate with a degree in civil engineering. And I had always sort of, kind of dreamed about the Corps, because all my professors in civil engineering at University of Puerto Rico, talked about the Corps and about the history of the Corps and all the large civil works in particular that the Corps, has done throughout its history. And so I definitely gravitated toward that sort of aspect of it. And that's kind of what, that's kind of what opened the door for me to join the Corps. So I joined right out of college. And I guess talking a little bit more about my heritage, being a Puerto Rican and in the U.S. sometimes is a little strange. Because as most folks know, Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States and has been since like the late 19th century, right around the time of the Spanish-American War. But as most people that are from the island, or anybody that's been to the island can tell you and spent significant time in Puerto Rico or with Puerto Ricans, it really is its own country. Maybe not in a legal or political way, but culturally, Puerto Rico is very, very different than a lot of the mainland U.S. states. And so I came to St. Louis with some hesitation and a little bit of a weird sense of not belonging, which was probably compounded with my father's warnings, for lack of a better term. He was, of course, from a different generation than I, and probably experienced more overt prejudices than he would care to admit. However, all that said, I have personally not found a more welcoming community than what I've found here in St. Louis and in the St. Louis district and in the core overall. And the people in St. Louis district is really a huge part of that reason, and the family environment that the core has to offer, as others have mentioned. So, being from Puerto Rico and definitely missing my island every day and getting that feeling in my heart whenever I get to visit it, I've been fortunate enough to be able to, set in MVS and in USACE thanks to, the people. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kimberly Cruz Fernandez. Similar to Jose, I am also from Puerto Rico, born and raised. My dad is from Puerto Rico, but my mom is from Dominican Republic. So I grew in a household with I had a lot of Dominican influence because of my mom, of course. So later in life, I chose the career to be a civil engineer, but that resulted as a change on life circumstances. And that is because I became a teenage mom, essentially. So for me, becoming an engineer seems to be a little bit more practical and easier. Some may think or differ, like that's too rough. But for me, at that point, it was like the easiest path for me in order to provide for my child. So immediately after I graduate from college, which I studied in the same college that Jose did, the University of Puerto Rico, the Mayagüez campus. I got hired with MBK here. And for me, working with the core was the best alternative because of the flexible schedule that they provide. And just like what Guadalupe mentioned, for me, my priority is my family. So that flexible schedule allowed me to say, well, this is where I can go, where I'm able to maintain this close relationship with my daughter. Meanwhile, in other offers may be a little bit more demanding of your time. So, me moving to Mississippi, also similar to what others may have mentioned, have presented some challenges. And the first is the language. At the beginning, I was not able to speak fluently English. I had really to go through the process of thinking in Spanish, translating it, and then pray that it come out right. But, within time and exposure, I've been able to overcome those. But the other one that more like under drug or challenges is being able to belong or to fit in. But as a overall, it has been an enriching and experience that I've learned from. And again, I came here with my daughter when she was 6 years old, and as a shout out, turned 20 yesterday, and she'll be graduating from college this semester. So I'm very proud of it. Over to you, Mel.
Thank you. Wow, we could almost just stop there. Your introductions gave us a lot of information and feedback already in lessons. So thank you for taking that time to talk about yourselves. I'm going to transition now to some prepared questions. And like I said, if the audience has questions, please put them in the chat so that we can start extracting those and be ready to ask them a little bit later. So I want to continue on the topic about heritage. And our first question is for Guillermo. Sir, if you would share with the audience what you would like for others to know about your heritage.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So as you guys may be noticing now, that as Latinos, we're very diverse. We come from, we have similar culture, but different backgrounds. So I was born in Philly, but I grew up in Peru, and as a kid, I loved the outdoors and hiking in the Andes, and I always marveled at Inca engineering, the ancient engineering stuff. We hike along and find these old Inca highways that's crossing mountains, kind of like the ones you see behind me, um, and ancient irrigation canals and terraces that are still used today, and Andean communities getting together and having little festivals, food and drink, um, to as part of the process to operate and maintain these old structures that are still used hundreds of years later. So I think all these backgrounds really formed my interest in water engineering, kind of on a Latino style. Over.
All right, thank you. And continuing on the topic of heritage, a question for Lupe. How has your heritage and upbringing shaped your career or professional interests?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. My career was shaped basically by my dad. My parents are U.S. citizens, as I am, and I state that because I have been asked if I am a U.S. citizen. And growing up, I always had to say that I was Mexican American. I couldn't just say that I was a Mexican. So my dad was raised in Laredo, Texas, right on the border. And he came down in 1950. He came here to Minnesota because he had heard that there were jobs. He found a job and then notified his family, notified friends. The next thing you know, there was about 10 different families who came here to Minnesota and started their roots here in Minnesota. My dad wanted something better for us. He didn't want us to do the work that he was doing. He was a migrant worker. He didn't want us to do that work. And actually, when I was about 10 years old, my dad took us out 3 weekends picking potatoes from sunup to sundown. And let me tell you, that was hard work. And that kind of instilled that I needed to go to school. I needed to get an education so that I could become someone. So that being said, that kind of started us where we were going to go. My brother in our family was the first one who graduated from college, and that was a huge accomplishment in our family. So I guess my dad's the one who, as I spoke earlier, my dad is the one who instilled the ethics, the working for me, and because he wanted it to be better for us, I ran with that and said, okay, I'm going to go with it. As far as some interest in that, I became an interpreter when I was 5 years old. I was in kindergarten, and there was a young boy there named Lolo who came from Mexico and did not speak English at all. And the kindergarten teacher looked at me and said, guess what? You're going to be interpreting for him. At that time, I knew that me working with people and helping people was what I was destined to do. And that kind of led me throughout my whole career helping people. I wanted to be that person to help anybody that I could. And English was a second language to me. I spoke Spanish mostly at home and with family members. And even up to now, I'm always there to help anybody who doesn't speak English. Last Friday, my husband hired somebody from Ecuador, and I had to be there to be the interpreter. So I interpreted for my husband to hire this person at his job. And at the end, when we were all done, I looked at her and I said, you're hired. My husband looked at me and said, you know what? You don't do the hiring, I do. But so I guess what I'm saying is I always want to help the next person, and we do have different dialects. She's from Ecuador. I'm Mexican, totally different dialects, but somehow we manage. When you start talking to Kimberly and Jose, they have a different dialect. I have friends here at work that are Puerto Rican also, and there are times when I will look at them and say, whoa, slow down. I'm not understanding what you say, what you're saying. So I think just being able to help somebody has really helped me with my heritage. Over.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Luke, Ma'am, if I could just chime in there
go
just
ahead,
a
Pete.
little bit.
Yeah.
That was a great answer there, Lupe. As for me, my parents, they're Depression generation, and they had to quit school in the 9th grade to support family. So they both went on to get their GEDs. But for me and for our family, right, it was, as you explained, education opened up the doors. And so while they couldn't help me with chemistry, physics, calculus, and all those other things, it was primarily their will and their drive and setting the expectations that this is what you need to do. And nothing short of that was acceptable. So even though I learned life after a B, so it was all good. But again, what they instilled in us was the drive, the desire, the diligence, determination, and perseverance and persistence. And quitting was just not part of the vocabulary. And as Dad said, for us is you always have to be twice as good to overcome whatever challenges that you have. And that, and I've had many setbacks. And bottom line is, if you weren't successful in pursuing a professional aspiration, you just got to work harder. And that's kind of what's been the driver for me. If you're not good enough, then you just got to work harder, and opportunities will come your way. So, but it all started from that foundation that they set as a child for myself and my other siblings.
Thank you both, Pete and Lupe. Those are great answers. And I think, what we've already heard between the introductions and those first couple of questions is two themes emerging: family and hard work. Already those are definitely seem to be a common theme for everybody on the panel. So next for Lupe and Guillermo, and we'll go in that order. Have you been able to maintain your traditions, culture, language, and identity in general while working for USACE? Do your words, actions, behaviors, et cetera, change when you're at work? And again, we'll start with Lupe.
Thank you, ma'am. I think my actions stay the same. As Kimberly mentioned earlier, sometimes you think in Spanish and you have to translate, and I'm finding that's happening more and more. Somebody will ask me something and I just have to pause for a second and say, whoa, wait a second. I have to translate that in my mind. But I think my behaviors here at work are the same. I've been treated, everybody's great. I mean, I don't think there's anything different here at work. We can talk about our cultures. Everybody's open. And what I do like is that we're hiring more Hispanics, Latinos here at work, and we can get together and we can talk about our cultures. I mean, yesterday I went down at the break room and there was some new faces, and I can't wait to sit and meet with them and talk with them. I know one of them was Coral, who's from Puerto Rico, and I met two other people. So I think here at work we can continue our traditions if we just take the time. Ask questions. I'm always asking people, ask questions about my culture and my traditions here at work. And I'm open to talk to you about it, and I hope everybody else is the same way. Over.
Okay. I guess I have a similar experience to Lupe. I always felt welcome and at the core. I do believe I keep a culture everywhere I go. I think I bring or we, all of us here on the panel, we bring a sense of Latino boisterousness to what we do. I think I like to work hard but have fun while doing it, and I think that leads to lots of people wanting to be my team. I think I'm that's something I bring. But another thing also I bring, I don't know if it's culture and more like an identity thing, which is similar to what you'll be hearing from the rest. I was born in Philly, but I really grew up in Peru most of my young years, and I grew up in a country full of real serious political violence and hyperinflation, Venezuela style. And I think it puts life in perspective, at least for me. And that's kind of what I bring. I don't, I don't freak out often. No, I think that's part of my background. Over.
All right, thank you both. Next question is also for Lupe and Guillermo. We're going to continue with the two of you. What are some common everyday struggles at work and within the local community and/or within the local community that members from the Hispanic community may have to contend with? And this time we'll start with you, Guillermo.
Okay. Yeah, to be frank, I have not personally struggled at the core. I've felt welcome. I think the core does bring a sense of family and community, certainly among my leadership. I have encountered folks that believe I'm a foreigner, and in the past, employers asking for social security number, or when you're young and you get a traffic ticket, asking you for social security number, which you feel that, if I was another race, it wouldn't be happening, or if I didn't have an accent, it wouldn't be happening. But I don't think this defines me. These aren't common. These are not the norm, but they do happen, and they're in the background. I also have a sense of awareness. I think that while civil work certainly is quite diverse, it may not be represented across all GS levels yet. Right? There's, it's not it's still it's a sense you have. Over.
Well, I'm going to join in here, and like Guillermo said, that it's always been welcome. I've always been welcome here at the core. I haven't felt that there's a barrier for me. But I will say that in the community, there are some barriers out there. A lot of families that I know, the children are U.S. citizens, but the parents are not. They're here illegal. So it's really hard for them to get a checking account or a debit card, a credit card. An example that I have on that is my husband and I coached baseball for many years, and we had some Hispanic families who were joining. And when it came time to pay, at that time, checks were what was big. And they didn't have checks. They had cash. And the commissioner was really struggling with that. They didn't want cash, and they kept saying, we need a check. And I had to explain to them that they didn't have checking accounts, that they needed to accept their cash. Their cash was good. Take the cash. And if they told you that they were going to pay on a Friday after payday, they were going to do it. You needed to take their word on it. And it took the community a while to understand that. And even so now, a lot of families still don't have credit cards because they don't have Social Security cards. So it's a struggle for them. And I don't know if people realize that everything right now is use your debit card, use your credit card. But there are families, and not just Hispanics, that don't have that. Right now, I have a PCA who works with me with my mother, and she's from Honduras, and she's working on getting her papers. And every time she has to cash a check, she goes to a check cashing service, and she gets charged quite a bit of money for that, and to cash her check. And I don't think people understand that, and I wish that is something that they can understand, that we do have struggles. We don't have everything that everyone else has as not being a U.S. citizen. And that being said, it's really hard when somebody comes up to you and asks you if you are a U.S. citizen or if you have a green card. I can say that because I have been asked that. Do you have a green card? And I'm shocked because I am a U.S. citizen, but I think everybody just assumes that because I am Mexican, I'm not a U.S. citizen. So I wish people just wouldn't assume things, and they'd do better if they were to ask. So ask questions is what I would like to get across to everybody. Ask the question and don't just assume that we're not U.S. citizens. And I think that would be able to help us with some of the struggles that we have. Over.
Thank you both for those insights. And I'd like to pull the thread a little bit on the topic of barriers. And this time I'm going to go to Pete and Kimberly. Do you feel there are barriers to USACE employment for people of Hispanic heritage? And have you encountered any barriers during your career? How have you overcome them? Pete, we'll go to you first.
Okay, so obviously different generation, right? Baby boomers. So separate the COVID period of now how I guess the work environment is definitely much more friendly to virtual and remote opportunities. But for me, here is what I saw or what I've seen as my career has progressed. I myself have not experienced any barriers. I think the barriers from a Hispanic culture and perspective are kind of self-imposed. And as you heard in previous responses, family comes first, right? And so even in my family, I'm an anomaly. I left. I didn't stay in San Antonio. I moved. In my career, I've moved 7 times, which again for a civilian is an anomaly. That doesn't happen. So I made that conscious choice to pursue personal aspirations. From a personal perspective, I think the family was enriched by seeing different cultures, different environments, getting ready to travel, and just not only from where we were, but the different places that we got to go to, China, Taiwan, different places like that, Japan. So living in Alaska was great. So they got to experience things that they would have never had I not pursued opportunities. So again, those for me, and what I've seen with colleagues and friends, they chose to stay put, and that was their personal choice. They made that conscious decision to make an impact in a different way by staying local, whether it's with their family, the church, the community, and they were still making tremendous impact within the organization for staying local. For me, it was about getting cross-functionally, culturally, and environmentally diverse, which I thought was necessary for me to pursue my career aspirations. And I think those, again, for me, that is, I think, what has helped me progress and get to where I am today. But at the same time, I think my family, my daughters, and my wife and I were able to experience the world in a different way. And again, professionally and personally, I think we're all enriched. But for barriers, I think what for my generation, really, it was, I don't know that people took advantage of seeking those growth opportunities where the organization could invest in them. They just chose to do it in a different way. And it's all good because the organization is better for it. Over.
That was a great answer, Pete. However, in my opinion, I believe there is a somewhat barrier, which I believe it to be natural because when it comes to hiring, people tend to gravitate with what they know, right? Based on where you are. So me being in Vicksburg, Mississippi, the demographic is mostly a Caucasian or Afro-American, and they pull from those schools, which is the Mississippi State, Ole Miss, or the surrounding school. So you're gonna get the demographic that is in place. So there is a conscious effort from leadership to go out there and be able to hire those that do not fit kind of the demographic, in this case, some Hispanics, right? So there is some inherent or natural barrier there, but they're being worked on because I truly believe the organization is trying to become more stronger because behind diversity, inclusivity, you can tackle any problem. And that's what as organization we want to do. Definitely. And it takes pride. Take pride in the work that I do. And essentially, yes, I have had some struggles in my career. And one that I can relate is, for example, when I came new, I did have the struggle of communication because of the language. So it took me some time. But there were some instances that I was able to do my work along with other coworkers who I, admire and respect, of course. And when you present your work, they tend to gravitate to the other coworker. Let's do it the way that that was done. And at some point you get, you think, if my work was not wrong, why don't we can try it as a whole team the way that I did it? And that happened in various occasions, but you need to think about the positive side. So now I know how they work, and now I know the way how I work. So it is a constant struggle to kind of somehow start squeezing, persevering through the opportunities and continue to improve on your work. So somehow you have to prove yourself that you're worth it of taking up challenges. So, and how I have overcome this is just being patient, working hard, being diligent on my work, persevering definitely, and continuously try to improve. I'm continually trying to see what can I do better. Definitely communication is one that I need to improve continuously, right? But how I can do my job better. So I normally try to look for details where I can improve so I can become a better tool to the organization. So when it comes to barrier, there's somewhat, but I believe to be natural. Now, there's another side that I would think of, perhaps is the leadership just want to continue, perhaps hire people are from the local just for retention purposes because they can see some of the challenges that people coming from outside, they may not fit in. They may not be able to make it home or belong or have some struggle. And, I think there are ways that we can overcome that. And I think the organization is definitely moving to a right way to becoming a more inclusive, more diverse, including the Hispanic culture. Over.
Yeah, those were both fantastic perspectives. Thanks for your honesty in both of those. Kimberly, I'm going to continue with you for the next question. Do you feel that your Hispanic heritage is, and I think you've already sort of answered this, but I want to let you give a fuller answer. Do you feel your Hispanic heritage is respected while working at USACE?
Like you mentioned, yes, I think respect to your Hispanic. I think people respect you as an individual, right? But you being from another place, you have a whole new package, right? So people tend to respect you as they get to know you, right? How you gonna? It's like you have to earn it. So I have been in situations where people, when they first come to you, they're hesitant. They don't know how to address you. They don't know how to speak to you, and some others that they're just completely curious about what you do, who you are, where you come from, what's your culture. But you have others that perhaps they don't care, or they just you know indifference. But something that I want to do is it just shows a little bit of interest, genuine interest toward the person regardless of their background. And that would be a way in which you could uh, you know, be able to connect with each other. I would like to share an experience that I had, and I think I felt that the when I belonged the most was when I volunteered for the emergency operation in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, because it was kind of the ideal condition. I'm Hispanic. I'm from Puerto Rico. I speak the language. So me working there, it's like I was thriving because I was able to use my language, my culture to for the mission, right? So it was an interesting opportunity to work there. So I think it does, but sometimes it's just within time people get to know you, they know where you're from, and so the respect is gonna get there.
All right, thanks, Kimberly. So I'm going to transition to Jose, and I'll start by saying that the Corps that benefits from having a large Puerto Rican community within its ranks. The St. Louis district has prioritized recruiting efforts in Puerto Rico for many years. And so, Jose, my question for you is, how have those recruiting successes shaped MVD's, our regional current workforce and future outlook?
Yeah, so thanks for that question, General Holland. And I think Kimberly touched a little bit on this in her question or her answer about barriers. And I think it's worth noting that, I also believe there are some natural barriers out there. They may be camouflaged or just innate, but there's nothing that's going to stop us from overcoming them. And so, as far as recruiting diverse backgrounds and those kinds of things, particularly from Puerto Rico, I, I hesitate to talk about how the future workforce has been developed because I think the jury's still out. We're still in a sort of nascent stage, right? But I'll tell you that we're definitely getting there. And I think in St. Louis in particular, really what it comes down to is the sustained leadership. And I'm talking about the, 15 civilian level that have a little bit of continuity. Because those are the folks that empower the 13s that are frontline supervisors to go out and sort of recruit outside the comfort zone, kind of as Kimberly kind of alluded to. I think there's a quote about leadership, and it's the art of getting someone to do something because they want to do it, right? I think General Eisenhower gets attributed that a lot. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen in St. Louis is sort of a sustained buy-in from that level in empowering the frontline supervisors, right? The folks that are really casting the nets and bringing folks in to go out and seek, folks from University of Puerto Rico or other, underrepresented groups or whatever term we want to use. And at the end of the day, really, and this is probably a philosophical discussion about recruitment in general, but recruitment isn't really hard because it's about connecting with people. And so if you empower these frontline supervisors to really go out and meet folks and, bring folks from Puerto Rico to do in-person interviews in St. Louis and start to lay the groundwork for how this, whatever particular area of the Corps is welcoming and there is, opportunity, then you'll really start to work at the retention piece, which is sort of the next step, right? Is because Kimberly alluded to with her answer, the fear in some levels of leadership of, well, if I go to Puerto Rico to recruit and bring somebody to St. Louis, they've got one foot out the door because they want to go back home to Puerto Rico or they want to, that's, we've got to kind of break that mindset a little bit as leaders because if the person stays within the Corps, it's still the Corps castle. That's still a good thing. And so, I've always, found that just going out and pounding the pavement and being that sort of salesman for the agency, wherever it is, it always yields dividends. And the last 8 or so years where I've been sort of helping work through the recruitment efforts in Puerto Rico have really, to me at least, showed that level of how that level of sort of dedication and sustained effort, can overcome some of the natural barriers that Kimberly kind of alluded to in her answer. So, over.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks for laying that out. I was really happy when I got to MBD to learn that of St. Louis's sustained, consistent recruiting efforts in Puerto Rico. I, of course, was not surprised that that was occurring in the Jacksonville district when I commanded SAD, the Caribbean being in the Jacksonville AOR, but didn't know that sustained effort was ongoing somewhere else. And so coming to MBD and hearing about St. Louis's effort over many years, and it's successful. And for everything you said is absolutely, I absolutely agree. And you know, when you take on an endeavor like that, it takes resources. It takes leader buy-in over many, many leaders, you know, not just this one commander, but many commanders over a long period of time. And perhaps equally, well, maybe even more importantly, are champions within the organization that ensure that it persists if you're going to be successful, as you said, not just for the recruiting and hiring, but for the retention. So thanks for sharing St. Louis's experience with that. I want to continue a little more on the topic of recruiting, and I'm going to go to Pete. Do you have any recommendations on how we can improve our recruitment within the Hispanic community?
Yeah, I do, ma'am. But I just, before I get onto that, I do want to touch a little bit on what Kimberly and Jose have, you know, mentioned about barriers. While my response may have said might have been self-imposed on how my generation of how they looked at their career aspirations, don't kid yourself. I had barriers. But as I mentioned in my initial response, it's like my father said, if you didn't get it, then you got to work twice as hard. I didn't let those things interfere with what my ultimate goal was going to be. So it was really a matter of, and I think for the younger generation, if you look where I'm at, you remove roadblocks and provided a tailwind for all of you young, you know, Hispanic engineers and other professionals to, you know, fulfill your professional aspirations and dreams. I did encounter that. Don't kid yourself. But it's a matter of overcoming and persevering, and we continue to make an impact. And whether it's myself, you know, Jose Sanchez, John Marino, we've all provided examples for all of you of what can be accomplished if you put your mind to it. And so, yeah, my work was questioned, but you just overcome it. And it doesn't, it's just not for us. Everybody experiences it because that's just the way we do it. And sometimes you may not like the answer, but that's a enterprise culture and barrier that we all have to deal with, and that's what we're trying to break down. As far as recruiting, and again, in talking to Jose and others, and throughout my career, it is great to see how I think the focus on how we recruit from Puerto Rico is amazing. And from where I sit, I wish that we would have that same sort of effort in pursuing other, you know, the Mexican American part of our you know, environment. We don't have that same focus in other locations. We try, and and this is where I have to use my platform where I sit and really try to drive USACE in a way that can have that same focused energy that, well, let's just say that we have for BEA. Where can I go to say I'm going to focus on a historically Black college or university? You can't say that at the University of Texas, Stanford, UCLA, and other locations. You can't say that. So how do I change that paradigm where now we can focus on, or if I'm going to go to a university, I want to find out where those Hispanic engineering societies are on the university and set up meetings at those universities. That's who I want to visit with. It can't be that I'm going to a university for general recruiting. We have to have that same focused energy on the Hispanic community as we do other cultures and other races and ethnicity that USACE focuses on. So we just have to have a different mindset, a different mental model. And this is an opportunity for me to leverage the position I'm in to kind of influence that focused effort in trying to further diversify USACE and long-term resiliency for the enterprise. So those are just my thoughts, ma'am.
Thanks, Pete. That's a great answer. And I totally agree. And especially as we face this as a region for hiring, as we've tried to hire up and continue to grow the organization to be able to deliver a larger program, encouraging all of our districts and all of our functions to go beyond its traditional pipelines. It's somewhat related to what you're saying. We are not going to be successful in building the work, or as successful as we could be in building the workforce in the future that represents the communities that we support and defend, if we don't diversify our approach and look for other pipelines that bring in even more representation of many different demographics, and Hispanic community being one of them. I also want to circle back on something, or maybe emphasize something you alluded to, and that's representation in our organization at the senior levels. Yourself, Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Moreno, and others, as they continue to move up the ladder, it's so important that our younger generation see representation, people that look like that, or that have similar experiences, that they see an example of what success looks like, and dismiss the assumptions that there's no place for them in the organization. And of course, that's true in USACE, that's true in the Army at large, it's true in all professions in America, but it is so important, and everybody on this screen and everyone who looks up to you sees that, oh, you know, maybe it is worth fighting through this barrier, not only because is it personally gratifying and rewarding to be a part of this organization and part of the solution, but it's important that people behind me see an example and see a growing representation of people who look and have similar backgrounds as they do. And I appreciate you mentioning that. I'm going to shift now to, you know, what brought us all here today, which is celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And I'm going to go back to Jose and Kimberly and ask them if they have any plans and what those plans are for celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month in their communities and home districts, starting with Jose.
Yeah, so thanks, ma'am. So, you know, last weekend actually was the Greater St. Louis Hispanic Heritage Festival over the weekend. And so I was able to attend that with my sons and my mom, who's actually visiting from Puerto Rico. She actually ducked out of the island inadvertently a few days before Fiona made landfall. So, you know, that's kind of the, you know, official type of celebration. But I'll just say, you know, I celebrate my heritage every day. You know, I don't hide who I am, and who I am is, you know, partially where I come from and you know, where I grew up, and you know, and who my family is and where they're from. And so, you know, even though I'm over here, you know, a couple flights away from my island, I communicate daily with my friends from high school and college that are still in Puerto Rico. You know, we have a group chat and we're always in connection. And I find that in some ways to be a celebration, because it allows me, you know, to have that connection still and you know, just feel at home in a way, right? You know, having my mother in town as well is also helpful, because even though I may sound very much acclimatized as far as my accent and language and whatever, you know, she is mostly a strictly Spanish speaker, and so you know, that helps me flex that muscle, which I definitely need sometimes. Being, you know, almost 15 years removed from being home. So I think that's my answer to that question. I do appreciate and think it's wonderful that the agency and the Valley is recognizing these types of you know, heritage months. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Over.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Similarly to what Jose mentioned, for me, the Hispanic celebration is something that I do on daily basis. I speak Spanish every day. I eat sancocho, mofongo, like whenever, any time of the of the week. But I take this opportunity as a learning experience for others. Because just like, we having this discussion, is because there is a need for people to learn more about the Hispanic culture so you can connect with each other. So what I want to do with this opportunity is to invite you, leadership, audience, to perhaps select one of the countries, over 20 of them, to each year, and learn about perhaps their music, their history, their food, cook it in your houses, maybe learn a phrase or something. And like that, next time you get to meet a person that may be Peruvian, that may be from Panama, Dominican Republic, you'll be able to share something that you know from them. And that would be an instant connection. So, with regards to the district, I normally am very engaged. Uh, Tomorrow would be the Hispanic celebration here in Vicksburg District. And I commonly dress with the traditional attire, which is like with the top ruffle and the flower skirt. And I partake of the celebration and the events and activities that are done. Not just in here, sometimes I support other district, which is not district, ERDEC, and also in the community, the Hispanic um, engineering organization. I forgot the sheep, we call it la sheep. They do a science night, Noche de Ciencias, in that community that I have helped them in organized event, and also serve as a panelist. Over to you, ma'am.
All right, thank you both. Those were great answers, and we are definitely celebrating with you. So we are actually almost out of time, so I'm going to skip the last question that I had, and what I was going to ask was for you all to provide some recommendations on educational resources that could be used by your coworkers, those in the audience who want to learn more about the Hispanic culture. I am going to ask my team, and I see that they're already doing it, to populate the chat with what your feedback was. We got that feedback from you before the panel so that we'd be able to put it in the chat. So their recommendations are being populated in the chat right now, and I encourage the audience to snatch those and explore them and get to know more about this culture. And I want to go then to a couple of questions in the chat. So two important questions I think that were in there, and I apologize that we can't get to all of them, but I think this one I'm going to ask Guillermo to get his thoughts on. What are some common questions or comments you get about your background? And I think more broadly, the person is asking, well, they put this in there, but I think, how can we prepare, those of us on this call, be better global citizens? And I think what's meant by that is, how can we better interact with the Hispanic communities, ask the right questions, and really get to know more about the Hispanic culture in a positive and helpful way. Maybe might be a way to, however you want to answer that, Guillermo. I think I kind of made that more complicated than it needed to be, but I'll let you clean that
up. Boy, that's a big question. Yeah, I think, I forget who, I don't know if it was Kimberly or Lupe who mentioned it earlier about, our culture is very, it's quite welcoming. It is diverse, whether you are in Puerto Rico, Mexico, or wherever. So we are used to differences, that's who we are. And so asking questions, I think we're very welcome to, asking, not assuming who we are, but asking us. I think it's and I think there's a lot of humor. I once, I have several Puerto Rican friends, and every time I go there, I'm pretty much laughing, 9 to 5 all the time. It's just, just everything is it's hard to insult a Latino, no, or Hispanic. We, in a way, we're very open in a certain way. So asking questions I think I would say that's the key.
All right, thank you. I think for this next one, I'm going to go to Jose. So the question was first asked, how did you adapt to the local culture? And I'm assuming that where you are now in St. Louis. And when we asked for a little more clarification, the follow-up was, how have you adapted to differences in cultural activities, accents, behaviors, and humor?
Yeah, so that I love that question actually, because I've gotten, and it's always in a very curious and benign kind of way, but I've always gotten questions about, you know, uh, just because I look a certain way or sound a different way or whatever, about validity of my Hispanic culture and things like that. And a lot of it is very benign and sort of, just out of curiosity. But I like what Guillermo said about we're used to differences in Hispanic America because each individual country is in and of itself so diverse and it's so integrated in a way. And so anyway, kind of more to the point of the question, I kind of came to St. Louis with a very open mind. That there was some hesitation, but what I knew of St. Louis was the Arch and Cardinals baseball. And fortunately, we have Yadier Molina on the Cardinals, and when I came here, he was on the Cardinals, obviously. And so that to me was a nice sort of focal point and center of mass that I could gravitate towards, because St. Louis is a baseball town, Puerto Rico is a baseball island for sure. And so I was able to sort of jump in and be passionate about those kinds of things. And then maybe just, because I was still, in my mid 20s and kind of ready to get out and meet people and whatever. And so I just kind of dove in and didn't hesitate to go out with whoever and meet folks. And so, with time, I met my wife here and we've got, 2 kids. So like I mentioned in my intro, we're definitely growing. I've definitely grown some roots in this region and in this area. So.
All right, great answer, Jose. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up because we really are truly out of time. I do want to summarize a little of what we've heard today in case anybody missed any of the discussions. I think it's important to summarize some major themes, and I've mentioned a couple of them already along the way. So my first takeaway from this is that the Hispanic community is internally diverse. I mean, just look at this screen. We know that from the screen, and now knowing what your heritage is, your specific heritage is, but understanding, Kimberly, I think you said more than 20 countries are associated with the global Hispanic community. So we know intellectually that's means that it's a pretty diverse group. And so just because one person from Hispanic background does not equate to knowing all. Number 2 is expression of pride in heritage, definitely a proud community and deservedly so. We heard it in each of your responses and how you talked about your families and everything that you've personally achieved and what your hopes and dreams are for the future. Number 3, and I mentioned this earlier as we were answering the questions, hard work and family were 2 consistent themes throughout this whole conversation. Number 4, I wrote down about recruiting and retention, and really what I'm about to say is an outcome of a discussion I and the panel had earlier as we were preparing for this. that, you know, it's really important to build the diversity, and we'll talk about Hispanic community specifically right now, important to build the diversity within all districts. And I guess really to the point is diversity of all demographics in every district. Otherwise, what will the natural gravitation could be that no matter how successful, for example, St. Louis might be in recruiting in one demographic, if they don't represent a diverse workforce overall, do your employees start to go other places to where they know that diversity is even more valued? And I'm just throwing St. Louis out there just because we had Jose talk about that specifically. But the more diverse all of our districts are across all demographics shows that we value diversity and is a more welcoming environment for new folks coming in. The last takeaway is to show interest in others. You know, that's just a great life lesson in general for all folks. Showing them that you're interested in them, that we embrace differences, that we want to get to know about them, even if they sound different, look different, have different experiences, that it's important to get to know them and make them feel like you're interested not only in what they bring to the team and how they're similar, but also how they're different. And that means a lot to them and sends a message of welcome at the outset when they're being onboarded, and then helps in retention overall. And I'm going to just add one last point that I just wrote down because I happen to see something in the chat. You know, food is the great global integrator. Every one of these sessions we do, the panel talks about, whether we talked about Juneteenth or the Native American experience in another episode, the topic of food comes up and the value of trying different food and appreciating different food. But I have to say, this is the first episode where we've actually had a recipe put in the chat. And I believe it was for Sancocho because Kimberly mentioned it and Amanda Fisher put a recipe in the chat. So we have reached a whole new level in the Valley, strengthening the team. So yeah, food is the great integrator. Okay, well, hey, I want to thank the panelists for taking the time today to speak to us about their experiences and heritage, and for being so honest with the audience. I think this has been a very powerful episode. I want to especially thank Mr. Pete Perez, not only, you know, getting a real senior person on this panel. That's the first time we've been able to accomplish that. So Pete, we appreciate you being a part of this. Also appreciate the fact that it is 5 hours earlier than it is for me. So it must be 5:40 in the morning for you. And I know you got up especially early to do this because it means that much to you. So thanks for that. I also want to thank the MVD staff and particularly our emerging leaders who help plan and coordinate the panelists' participation and content of the discussion. Special thank you to our sign language interpreter. You see her moving those hands furiously. She does not get the script before we get started. She's just that good. And she is always on, always ready to participate in this every quarter. Denise Smith, we appreciate you. I want to thank the region for tuning in. We got up to 402, I think, at the peak of stations tuning in. These forums are about our people and ensuring our people know they are valued for their unique contributions and diverse backgrounds. And as a reminder, I welcome the input of our audience for future topics. Thus far, the topics have come as a result of your suggestion, and that practice will continue. So in closing, I encourage everyone to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month in some way. Thank you for all that you do in support of the people and resources of our region. As always, I am proud to be on your team. That is all from here, signing off from Vicksburg. Have a great day, everybody.